Welcome back.
Again.
This is going to be weird without Keith here. It's going to be very weird.
Yeah.
Keith is currently in a business meeting.
He's usually the one that says the wrong episode.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the way we start. So I don't know how to start now.
It's just not going to be the same. We'll just pretend we don't know. So episode 21 today. We're just looking through the numbers. I feel like we were making a joke about this, how we were like, yeah, we're going to be super consistent with podcasts.
And
we weren't.
As with always, consistently inconsistent.
Our last group one was January 27th. And we're 2 out of 3 today. But what we thought we'd do today is just honestly just get the ball rolling. Because it's been a pretty hectic in-season. That's pretty generic to say, but pretty hectic in-season. But we thought we'd just get one rolling, do a quick little update, and then we'll get Keith, either be you and Keith or all three of us together, just do an athlete wrap-up, or just like a catch-up in terms of what everyone's been doing, where they're at, successes, where the teams are at, all that kind of stuff. But I thought we'd bring everybody else into like our questions of the week.
Yeah.
I feel like this is something you've had for the last few years. I was even thinking about this on the way here. I was like, how many questions do you reckon we've asked?
So many. It's getting to the point now where it's just like we're just scraping the bottom of the barrel of questions.
It's getting pretty rogue.
It gets worse and worse. And then we're going to remember that there's kids in the gym.
Yeah.
Keith.
Yeah.
When you come up with these questions and when the answers are on there. And that parents see this as well.
Yeah. That's cool.
I'm having to come in and censor Keith's questions.
That's saying something. That's saying something. What's this week's one?
This week's is what position do you lie in when you sleep? So the common answers we've got is on your side, on your front, on your back, starfish. What else is there? On the roof, like Spider-Man, little spoon, big spoon. I put big spoon with Keith. Keith put on all fours. Not sure how that one works. Starfish. I can't remember if I said that.
That's a key thing.
Oh, yeah. Comment below what your sleeping position is.
Also comment below if you've got any better ideas for questions of the week.
Yeah.
We need to just cycle back to the start. The start was good.
Yeah. Like we had like the real controversial ones, like do you keep your tomato sauce in the pantry or the fridge?
Yeah. What was the other ones?
So many.
Even one of the other ones you sleep with socks on. That was pretty controversial.
That was controversial, yeah. I was surprised how many people slept with socks on. Some people slept with socks on year round. I'm like, bro.
Yeah, that's different.
That's crazy.
That's different.
In winter, I kind of give it a pass, but just put more layers on your bed, I reckon.
What was the other one? There was another one on there. Anyway, we'll think of it again. But yeah, question of the week. We'll bring that back in. That can be maybe Keith's segment for the week.
Keith's segment, yeah. Well, Keith also doesn't understand how a question of the week works because I'll put one up on a Monday and it'll come to Wednesday, Thursday, and then he'll change it. I'm like, mate, we're already scraping the bottom of the barrel. You got to at least milk these for a week.
Killing ideas. And then just a few other bits and pieces. We obviously got the hoodies coming back out. Another one interesting part for our crew in terms of we put the other hoodies out last year. Everyone wanted the old hoodies back. We brought the old hoodies back. And then the usual people will be like, yeah, hell yeah, so good. And they don't buy any.
Charlie Watson, put your money where your mouth is,
calling you out, mate. So this is just a pre-sale. The pre-sale closes on Tuesday. So we're just going to do one big order. That's it for the year. We'll do a bit of a winter order each year. And then, so Tuesday, pre-sale closes. Get your hoodies. And then next up we got is our youth side of things, which has actually been really cool. Finishing off our first development program.
Yep.
Like officially
first term program.
Do you want to talk a bit more on that?
Well, obviously our youth program up until now has kind of been, rather than like a full structure, we kind of run it just like we do for all our other clients where, like you come in, we'll kind of chat with the kid, we'll have like a general framework that we work on, but then kind of personalize it to that individual as needed. But then more and more, like especially with the youth guys, obviously our philosophy in how we generally approach the start of youth training, especially from like the development age that we've kind of put of the training age of 0 to 1, 0 to 2. Obviously the things that you're doing are pretty similar. So we thought rather than like trying to individualize too much, and for the most part we were doing pretty similar stuff, kind of get them through a bit more of a generic program, obviously modifying and tailoring as needed. But that's been quite successful. All the kids that have done it this term have absolutely killed it. And I think pretty happy with how the program was structured. And I think, like, you know, as with anything, when you write like a program like that, as soon as it starts, you're like, oh, damn, like, got to change this, got to change that. So there's maybe a few things that maybe tweak in the future, but I think for the most part, everything was pretty solid. And it was pretty well scalable just to everyone's abilities. You had some kids who picked stuff up really quickly and we could load them up. Other ones that were just focusing on the technique a little bit more for a bit longer. But overall successful. And then with the goal of, as they finish that 10-week kind of program, they move on to our normal youth kind of stuff where we have that bit more of a framework to build upon and tailor it to what they need. But I think, pretty much everyone will move on.
I know, it's pretty cool because obviously this is kind of, I feel like we were talking about this the other day. I think we'll talk about when we get to injuries and stuff like that. But we're like, how important it is to get into the gym at that earlier age. So I feel like our entry age is starting to get lower and lower and lower and lower. And we were talking about this is a side subject, we'll come back to it later, but in terms of that, like we're at this point in the season where there's a lot more chaos, there's a lot more things happening. We've got so many different loads and so many different management, and it's generally the people that have the lower training age that are having more fluctuations and things, so don't have as many off seasons, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like this was kind of like because obviously one of our big goals is to try and influence this athletic population WA. That's a big one. And we're attacking it from like the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that maybe haven't had as much exposure, the young years. And then like we're hitting it from the other side where we've got these 10, 11, 12-year-olds where we're getting them into the gym early. And like even for me, like two of the boys came into North the other day and they were like, yeah, like we had a pretty big weekend. We're pretty sore. Can we go do some mobility? And I was like, oh.
I definitely did not think that when I was 12.
But like we're having those kind of conversations and those questions. And then even one of the boys came in last night. He was sick last week. And we had a bit of a chat about, all right, like your load management. We enter back in from sickness, and he's 10 years old. And it's like we're having these conversations at 10, 11, 12 versus 17, 18, 19 and the influence that's going to have on the long term.
Sometimes even older than that.
Yeah, literally. Which, long circle, but like it's been pretty cool to watch this development program, and we've found something, we've built something over the years that's allowing us to tick all those early boxes, and it's very, I don't know what the word is, but it's easy to get in and get started on a program like this.
And I think like the biggest thing, like we've said for like forever with the youth guys, is we know that we're not going to be training these kids forever. We want to, as a big part of that development is that they learn how to train, they learn how to manage their loads themselves, and having these kind of conversations, and that's way more powerful than any training program is going to be. And then even, you know, get guys that go to college, come back, and they'll be telling me about, we did this, I adjusted this by myself as needed. You know, like you got guys who are at D1 colleges that have all the resources. Then you got guys who are at D3, D2, and AIA, and they're coming back and they're like, yeah, we had like our assistant coach was the strength coach and we maxed out bench press every week. You're like, sweet. But they're, you know, obviously having an understanding of what the work we've done here, and it's like, all right, I still need to tick off these boxes of like my ankle prep because I've had a history of ankle injuries, or I know to do my ISOs with my knees just to make them feel better. But if we can start instilling that from, you know, 10, 11, 12 as they progress through junior academies and all that kind of stuff, because it is the nature of, you know, obviously we have the luxury of having this individual, and then our sole focus is that individual. And it's easy in a team setting when you've got 30, 40, maybe even more guys to look after. Like, you're not going to be able to give that same level of care. So instilling that knowledge into those kids is going to be super powerful when they're in a team setting where they won't get that same individual attention.
Yeah, that troubleshooting is massive. But even that, like having that, like I feel like we've got a fair few athletes now that have been in for a while that you can look at a session, or you could look at something and go, oh, yeah, like I know this is a little bit too far. I know this is like they can load manage themselves a little bit, and obviously that's quite subjective. And, can be hard to be done, but they know they can look at a session and go, well, that doesn't make much sense because of everything they've done. Or they go into a session, there's no prep at the start of the session. It's like, well, I know that I need to do something for this. Like if I'm going to hit top speed, where's my hamstring prep, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's been pretty cool, those conversations we're starting to have with athletes at younger ages. And then that kind of brings us into like our youth combine. So we're moving into combine number 3. I think this will be the one where we actually should be able to get all of our youth kids together.
Yeah.
There's not as many tournaments and things on, I don't think.
No.
So 18th of July on the Friday morning, 8 a.m, we'll be in here at HQ, and we're just going to go through, we usually go through about 4 or 5 different assessments. It only goes through about an hour, but it's kind of like a bit of an entry level to our adults combines that we do at the end of the year. And it's a good way for the kids to get around each other. And it's a good way for us essentially just to profile a little bit, do certain jump testing, get some metrics down. And again, if we can start grabbing some numbers at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, we've got some numbers there that are in their profiles for good. And obviously these numbers become irrelevant as they get taller, bigger, wider, and the structures start to change. But we can start to just visually see the way they move in bits and pieces, and we can, at the end of as they're going through their programs, we can track some progress, and at the same time we can see different movements and assess those.
And even from like our perspective as well, it's like, oh, sweet, like we really didn't focus enough on this area, or we had good progress on this particular area, so that obviously that style of the program's working. So it helps us evaluate our own programs as well. Yeah.
Which are cool. And the last few have been really cool to see all the kids together.
I think also like the different gyms, obviously.
Yeah.
Like with some of our adult athletes, they're floating between and they get to know each other. And then we have the combines. Last few years, people getting to know each other from all the different gyms. But the kids are like pretty much just at the one gym. So for them to get to meet each other and have someone else to compete against rather than just their like same friends. Yeah. And even like within the gym, like because the kids are in a much more structured, like they come on a Monday, Wednesday because their schedules are so hectic. Yeah. They might never see any of the other kids. Like you forget, I'll be like, oh yeah, you know Ben. And they're like, who's Ben? Yeah. Like I don't know who that is. Yeah.
It was cool. I think it was the last one before where a couple of the boys met each other for the first time, and then you could see them. They'd turn up to the gym like, hey, how you going? Like they're like best mates. So it's cool, and that's excuse me. That's a big part of obviously sport is like building mates and building friends, and especially if you can build mates from different sports and you can build those different connections. I think that's just as important. But then that brings us to obviously we're opening up term 3 spots. So I guess it'll be depending on when the school holidays finish for each respective school.
Yeah. I think everyone finished at the same time. I don't know. All these private schools,
kind of on the PSA schedule.
3-week holidays. I know some schools have the 3 weeks, like the extra week is before, and then some of them is extra week after. Yeah, okay. Just to really mess things up.
But we set these up relative to the individual school. So when term 3 starts for their respective school, that's when the new program will start. So obviously we have spaces that have opened up for that. If you're interested to sign up, if you have any questions, just shoot us a message on either of the pages, depending on where you're wanting to train. So
we've got that article that we put together explaining like the different programs. Yep. So if you are a youth athlete who's maybe had a couple of years of training elsewhere, and you think you're maybe a little bit beyond the development program, then you can also slot into our next tier.
100%. And then we've got, I've put down physiotherapy. We've had a physio start up in the last few months. That's how long it's been since we've done a podcast. Yeah. So Alex Chin is unreal. I'm going to try and get, he doesn't know this yet, I'm going to try and get Alex on the podcast, get him behind the mic. He's taken a while to come out of his shell. It's actually been pretty funny. Yesterday was probably the most excited I've ever seen Alex. And of course it was about technology. Some new valve kits coming. I've never seen a smile on his face so big. But it's been unreal to have Alex on board. Obviously being within that professional space. And I don't know, I just feel like we obviously connect really well, and his ideas and how passionate he is about what he wants to do with this return to sport side of things, along with what we've been trying to build out for a while now. Yeah. It's been really cool. So
yeah, I think there's only so much obviously we can do from a return to play perspective. Obviously we can do a lot in that later stages of the return to play, which we've had a lot of success with, but you know, it's only going to get leveled up by nailing that initial stage, which, I mean, talking with Chinny and the kind of PD stuff that we've gone through with him, in terms of just like the level of detail that can impact long-term results from a return to play injury recovery kind of perspective. Like, it's easy to, and we like obviously chat with Chinny about this, but it's so easy to go through the motions with those like range of motion exercises, the muscle activation exercises in those first few weeks post, especially like big injuries like an ACL or other surgeries. But that attention to detail and making sure you're nailing those will have, you know, impact long after you've returned to play. Even, you know, stuff he was telling us about the other day about, I can't even remember the exact name, but that muscle activation thing. Do you remember the acronym?
Oh, yeah, inhibition.
Yeah, it was like some inhibition thing from like, yeah, here's some health smart guys talking about injuries. But the muscle inhibition, like obviously we know you have a traumatic injury, there's going to be some level of inhibition in those early stages, but then now there's research showing that that lasts for 2 to 3 years post-injury, post-recovery. Even then, so the importance of then staying on top of all that stuff, which has been fun to kind of, as we built out the other day a little bit, that return to play.
You hear it from physios all the time. Like it's a very hard profession where it's like, especially if you don't have that framework and stuff. And I think that's why Chinny was so excited about, like, we're in here together. Like when we're coaching and he's doing his physio appointments, saying we had one of my athletes in yesterday. He was on the floor doing physio appointments. We were chatting back and forth. Then he finished an appointment with someone else and then came out. We had a chat about it, what we're going to do, a bit of a game plan, what's the action. It's like you need those eyes on, and especially in those earlier stages. I think that's the struggle. Is like,
and that's a luxury we have as well, as we have the ability to see these guys so frequently compared to a physio. I don't know, like chatting with physios all the time. Like, yeah, I see this person for 20 to 30, maybe 45 minutes if you're lucky, depending on the clinic. But at most, maybe once a week, if that. So it's like all this, and they have to do this rehab like every single day. And the attention to detail needs to be there every day. And from the athlete, like it's very hard to have that attention to detail. But if you have someone there keeping you accountable,
because there's so much new stuff as well. Like imagine getting like an entirely new program, and obviously they've got time constraints with what they're doing as well. So like you've got to remember everything that's happened in that entire appointment. So it's but I was even thinking about this yesterday. It was really cool. Got a referral from another physiotherapist I respect a lot, and she passed someone on. They're at 7 months post-op, and they're getting to that point now where like it's kind of handed over to more of like the running in the field and all that kind of stuff, and they're constrained by that. And even then, for some physiotherapists that are running that all the way to the end of the rehab, you can see some of the stuff that we're doing on the field. It's like, can you imagine how hard that would be to write a field program and not know what's going on?
Yeah, I never see
not see them run. Yeah. So it's like even that side at the other end of the coin as well, when it's just as important, and the cutting side of things. And there's only so much you can do within a small physio room.
Yeah,
identify the cutting and the toe and
what we're talking about, like the warm up side of things as well. Like realistically, like can you get full intent in 20 minutes, having assessed all the other stuff that you need to do? So like, I think it's really cool the setup that we've got, and excited to build that out.
And that's kind of like I put down here like a return to sport. Like we was chatting about this yesterday, and I was like, I know we don't even need to say it, that we've got a big goal of being one of those places that people can really trust to come from that start to end return to sport. And I feel like that's something where we're personally trending in that direction. We obviously love the performance side of things, and we definitely push that side of things, but I feel like there's a bit of a gap in that return to sport. And I feel like that is something that we're very passionate about. We've all done our own injuries, and we've all been on the sideline for a decent amount of time. We know what it feels like. So we've actually been working pretty hard in the background there to build out these systems and setups and really, I don't want to say the word bulletproof, but I guess robust. But yeah, I don't know, like build a highly, highly, highly confident and highly, I guess professional standard of return to sport. And we really want to make sure, because you hear about all the horror stories of, and it's not always necessarily anyone's fault, but you do hear the stories about repeated like we're back to back to back to back, and sometimes it's both fold, it's following the program and all that kind of stuff. So it's the constraints of the environment, constraints of what you've got available to you. It's all those kind of things. So we're working pretty hard. We've got some new kit on the way. We're adjusting our systems. We're obviously working quite close with Chinny, and this is something we want to build out pretty big. So it'll be pretty cool. We'll keep updating in terms of what we do and where we're changing things, and especially even for you on the court, that's even a different kettle of fish as well, which isn't really done as much, I don't think. No. So it'll be pretty exciting to see what we build, develop, change, apply, all that kind of stuff. We're pretty cool.
And kind of like, it's not necessarily like bulletproof or whatever, but
that's the wrong word.
but it's like that system where an athlete's gone through and they can be confident that they've done everything that they could in their power. Because obviously, like injuries, you can have a freak accident, you can't control stuff, but if you can control everything that's in your power, do everything that you can control to put yourself in the best position to succeed, come back better, like I think you can be confident in that, and hopefully we've established a system that we can be equally as confident that we've done everything that we need to with the athlete to get them back. And
I think that's where we're going, is we're building out those landmarks and those, and there's obviously some really good standards that have been put out there, and even just utilizing around those, like we want to get you to that point and show you, which is probably the most important part, show like you these numbers,
psychological readiness as well.
100%, and so you know in your head where the structures are, where your body's at, from all those different bits and pieces, even from a movement capacity, like sprinting, change direction, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And then to slowly close out this short podcast, just like a bit of a mid-season kind of check-in. I don't know where we want to go with this, but it's essentially like checking I know for us in terms of rugby, we've got 6 weeks left, and there's 3 weeks of finals, so we're kind of over the halfway mark. But we're definitely at that point in the season where flus are getting around. I think it was like the shortest day of the year was like on Monday or something like that. Like it's that tough.
We're on the come up.
There's more sunshine coming. But we're definitely at that point of the season where you're going to have to bring out a few different strategies to keep the motivation there, to look after the body. And I think that's probably one of the first ones, as always, is going to be the communication side of things. Communicating how the body is, communicating the fatigue levels, communicating those bits and pieces, and adjusting schedules as well. I've had to do it with a few personally with my guys in terms of like those Mondays have very much become like low stress days. Very much in terms of what do we need to do to freshen up for a good Tuesday session. But anything else you can think of?
I think the same thing, like some guys who may be training 3-4 times throughout the week, throughout most of the season, but you're getting to that point, fatigue's accumulating. I know for like basketball, they have a lot of double headers. If you're D-League, you're playing maybe three games in a weekend. For some of the kids who are also playing under 18s, under 20s, they're playing 4 games in a weekend, sometimes 2 or 3 on a Sunday. Obviously that fatigue is going to build up. So it's like not having that pressure on yourself to try to get 4 sessions in during the week. It might be get 2 sessions or 2 sessions and like a bit more of a recovery day in, and just, like you said, set yourself up for a good Tuesday, set yourself up for a good Thursday, and then set yourself up for, to play well on the weekend, rather than, having to think that you need to do all this work. It's like now it's that point in the season where maybe not necessarily maintenance, but you're just ticking the boxes that you need to and making sure you're feeling fresh, and that recovery becomes a bit more of a priority. And especially as we get to those later stages, come finals, obviously that's when we want to be performing our best. So, it's kind of like this point of the season where it's a little bit different for everyone. You got guys who are pushing for finals. You got guys who are like, all right, we're not making finals, but getting the best out of the season. But it's still like, where's the priority is going to be performing as best as you can on the weekend, and how can you structure your week to set that up as best as possible. So for some people that might be still training 4 times a week. For others that might be training 1 to 2 times a week, but just getting like really good quality work in.
Because there is that hard psychological, even through the changes of the seasons, people can really lock into schedules. And it's like, if I don't keep that schedule, I'm failing or I'm not doing the right thing. And I think about this a lot, and especially the crew that have done the pre-seasons and off-seasons. I say this a lot, where you've got to back and you've got to, I guess, utilize all the work that you've already done and trust in the fact that we can reduce volume, we can reduce frequency, and we can get good doses of training stimulus with less. Because you've also, which is probably the biggest influence right now, it depends on what's happening in those team sessions. Like I know for us, we're still training pretty hard at this point of the season, obviously, because we're trying to crack this little window that we've got open. So that then is taking away resources that are influencing our recovery. So definitely think about scheduling, think about changing things around, having complete days off, like compiling days, training before your club sessions and stuff like that. But definitely, especially if you've got a good capacity and you've got a good build up of off-season loads and pre-season loads, really lean into that and use the fact that you've done a lot of work already and you can start to peak at the right time.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, if you put, like you said, back to that, you're locked into the schedule and you're putting pressure on yourself. It's like, if you have that communication with your coach, which is that's obviously the biggest piece there, because then we can help it. Like, that's the beauty of our setup, is that we can adjust your program. Like, you don't have to do that. But communicating, and then also it's like, if you put your pressure on yourself to do 3 sessions, but you always feel pretty shit on a Monday, you miss the Monday session, and then you only get two out of your 3 sessions done, that you're missing a whole chunk of work that in our scheduling and our planning for your week, we've assumed that you've done that. And then if you do that 2-3 weeks in a row, then all right, maybe we've missed some qualities that we needed to tick off. If you just have that conversation with the coach and like, hey, like Monday's not feeling good, can I either have it off or have a more of a low day? Then we can shift that stuff around in the week just to make sure you're ticking that stuff off. So you're far better off doing less but more quality than just missing stuff altogether. And then, 2-3 weeks down the track, you're like, oh, I haven't actually hit the hamstring load I need to, and I've got this hamstring niggle. I think it's really important to stay on top of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that going inside an athlete's head, that's a big one. Like, especially if you've been grinding, but like pushing so on the grind, been pushing so hard to be consistent, and that fatigue catches up at some point, and then they miss 1 or 2 sessions, and you're like, oh, I feel guilty, I feel like I'm failing my coach, I feel like I'm fat, like, and then they just end up missing all of this stuff, and it's 100%, like, it's so easy to work around, and there's that like practical and optimal kind of doses that we can get in. But yeah, I think that's pretty big. So we can chat about that more on the next potty.
Yeah, we've got a previous podcast. You probably don't have to scroll that far back, actually, because we haven't done the last podcast. But we talked about the communication and how we can optimize that communication from an athlete coach perspective, and even from a physio coach perspective. Obviously, we're very fortunate with the setup we have, but how can athletes communicate with their physios at the club, or if they're external? Those are all going to be huge pieces in the success that you have in the later stage of the season.
100%. And the other point thing I put here was just, I think a big thing is just change your scenery. In terms of, this is where some of those like recovery, ice bath, sauna places, even like change your scenery in terms of changing your schedule up. Like, you're turning up to the same places Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday every week. It's the same face, same thing every week. Like, try and give yourself a bit of a break somewhere. Try and change your schedule. Try and get some kind of new stimulus and adjust that monotony of just
novelty.
Novel
stimulus.
Yeah, of everything that's going on. I think that's another big one too. And the last piece we got here is just the combine, 2025 combine. So,
hell yeah,
we're like shit. Nah, but it is. It's a massive part of it. I feel like obviously we get sharper and sharper and sharper every year. They are a pretty big day. They are a pretty big demanding day. But at the same time, what it does for our community is pretty massive in connecting. And especially this year is going to be the first year with North.
Yeah.
So we've got a few ideas in terms of how we're going to run this.
Rep your colours.
Yeah. It's red or blue. But yeah, we've definitely got a few ideas. We've even thrown up the idea in terms of like, I guess making this day, like having some kind of charity or something like that we can push for this day and actually make it a bit more of a fundraiser kind of event. There's a couple of things that have been a bit closer to us in terms of what we've been thinking about, but and then there's some other ideas we've had in terms of like the actual individual athletes in their own kind of charities or something like that. But we're throwing it up in the air at the moment. We're brainstorming a few different ideas, but we definitely want this day to be something of a bit more impact, just beyond obviously our community as well. So, stay tuned for that. We'll have more info, all that kind of stuff on it a bit more. We kind of start all the planning next month. So when you do see that day at the end of November and December, just realise this is 6 months in the making.
Probably more.
Probably more, yeah. But yeah, we're going to start cracking on that next month, get planning for that, get the info out there, all the details, locations, all that kind of stuff, get it all jotted out. And yeah, have a bit more info on it. So anything you want to add?
Just hopefully we'll be back within 6 months to talk about it.
Yeah, the next podcast will be like the day before the combine.
Yeah, we won't make any promises about the consistency this time. We'll just say it is what it is.
Yeah. We'll do one every now and again. But yeah, hopefully next one back with Keith will definitely be on. It'll be Keith, Adam, or all three of us. We'll try to get Chinny on the podcast. Even get Mr. Demetrius on here as well.
Demetrius Johnson.
I was even thinking about just doing like a meet the staff, like just one with each of you.
Yeah, CJ.
Yeah.
We can meet CJ.
Yeah.
AJ. DJ.
Whatever the Trinity kids want to call him.
That could be the question of the week. What is his real name? Is it AJ?
Something J.
CJ?
Something James. Anything else you can think of?
Not that I can think of, no. Like, subscribe, comment what sleep position you are.
This is actually 15 minutes faster without Keith on the podcast.
Yeah, it was. Mostly because of the rambling at the start.
Sweet.
Well, if you've made it this far, thank you. See you next time.